December 19th, 2023. A woman stands alone in her restaurant kitchen at midnight, 3 days before losing everything she's built, 3 days before Christmas, holding a letter from the bank that ends with the words "Final Notice." She doesn't know that tomorrow morning, a man she's never met will walk through her door, order a simple breakfast, and leave behind something that will completely shatter her understanding of her mother's life, of sacrifice, and of the invisible ways our kindness echoes through time long after we're gone. Her mother was a maid who cleaned offices at night and served breakfast during the day. What happens next is real, every single word of it, and it will break you. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what's about to unfold will challenge everything you think you know about the impact one person's kindness can have. Her name is Jasmine Washington, 42 years old, and she's about to lose the only thing her mother left her. The restaurant, Mama Rosa's Kitchen in Minneapolis, Minnesota, has been in her family since 2005. 18 years of serving breakfast and lunch to a neighborhood that's changed dramatically around them. The building itself is old, needs constant repairs, the kind of place where the heating breaks down every winter and the walk-in freezer makes a sound like it's dying, but it's hers. Or it was. Jasmine inherited it when her mother, Rose Washington, died suddenly from a heart attack in March 2023, 9 months ago. She was 68 years old. Went to bed one night and didn't wake up, no warning, no goodbyes, just gone. Jasmine found her the next morning when Rose didn't show up to open the restaurant at 5 a.m. like she'd done for 18 years straight. Rose had worked as a commercial cleaner for 23 years before opening the restaurant. Night shift. Offices, corporate buildings, and places where she was invisible to the people who worked there during the day. She'd cleaned bathrooms and vacuumed carpets and emptied trash cans while wealthy executives slept in their comfortable homes. Saved every dollar she could. Worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years. Cleaning offices at night, waitressing during the day, and doing laundry on weekends. All of it to save enough money to open her own place. A place where she could treat people with the dignity she'd rarely received while cleaning up after them. Mama Rosa's Kitchen opened in 2005 with money she'd saved over 2 decades of invisible labor. It was her dream, her monument to the belief that everyone deserves to be treated like they matter, regardless of how much money they have. Jasmine had tried to keep her mother's legacy alive, tried to run Mama Rosa's Kitchen the way Rose had run it, with the same warmth, the same generosity, the same stubborn belief that feeding people meant more than just filling their stomachs. But Rose had a habit that made no financial sense. She gave away food, a lot of food. If someone came in and couldn't pay, Rose fed them anyway. If a regular was going through hard times, Rose would pack extra meals for their family. If someone looked hungry on the street, Rose would bring them inside, sit them down, and make sure they ate. She did this for years, quietly, without fanfare, and it slowly, steadily drained the business dry. When Jasmine took over after Rose died, she discovered $78,000 in accumulated debt. The building needed a new roof, estimated at $25,000. The commercial refrigeration system was failing. The property taxes had increased. And Jasmine had continued her mother's practice of feeding people who couldn't pay because it felt like betraying Rose's memory to stop. Her accountant, Marcus Thompson, had been brutally honest with her in November. He'd sat across from her in the empty restaurant after closing, spread the numbers across the table like evidence at a trial. "Jasmine, you're 3 months behind on loan payments. The bank has been patient because they knew your mother, but they're a business. December 22nd is the final deadline. You need $81,500 or they start foreclosure proceedings. You'll lose the building, everything." Jasmine had spent the last month trying everything she could think of. She'd applied for small business loans and been denied. Her credit was destroyed from missed payments. She'd started a crowdfunding campaign that raised $2,300, which helped but wasn't nearly enough. She'd worked open to close every single day, 7 days a week, barely sleeping, living off coffee and whatever food customers left behind. She'd even considered selling her mother's house, the place where Jasmine had grown up, but it was underwater on the mortgage. No equity left. By December 19th, she'd raised $47,000 total, still $34,500 short. 3 days before the deadline. 3 days before Christmas. 3 days before everything her mother had built, everything she'd sacrificed 2 decades of invisible labor to create, would be taken away. December 20th, 2023. Jasmine opened Mama Rosa's kitchen at 5:30 a.m., half an hour late, because she'd finally fallen asleep around 3 and slept through her alarm. The restaurant was freezing. The heating system was acting up again. She could see her breath in the air as she moved through the dark kitchen, turning on lights, starting the coffee machine, trying to shake off the heavy fog of exhaustion and despair that had settled over her. The morning regulars started trickling in around 6. There was Bernard Jackson, 71, a retired postal worker who ordered the same thing every morning: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. There was Keisha Williams, 34, a nurse at Hennepin County Medical Center, who grabbed breakfast before her 12-hour shift. There was the Henderson family, parents and 2 teenagers, who came in every Wednesday morning before school and work. Jasmine served them all with a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else, took orders, made small talk, pretended she wasn't counting down the hours until she lost everything. Around 7:15, a man walked in she'd never seen before. He was maybe late 50s, African-American, well-dressed but not showy, dark gray coat, simple scarf, the kind of quiet elegance that suggested success without advertising it. He looked around the restaurant slowly, taking in the details, the photos of Rose on the walls. The hand-painted sign above the counter said, "Everyone eats here." The Christmas decorations Jasmine had put up, even though they felt like a cruel joke. He chose a booth by the window and sat down. Jasmine grabbed a menu and walked over, her body moving on autopilot, while her mind spun through the same useless calculations she'd been running for weeks. How to find $34,500 in 3 days. How to perform a miracle she didn't believe in. "Good morning," she said, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. "Can I start you with coffee?" The man looked up at her with dark eyes that seemed to register more than most people's, that seemed to actually see her, not just look at her. "Yes, please." Black, no sugar. She poured it, set it down, and left him to study the menu. Watched him sit there for several minutes, holding the menu but not really reading it, just staring out the window at the gray Minneapolis morning. When she came back, he ordered the special. The Rose's Blessing Plate, her mother had called it. 3 eggs, any style, home fries, toast, bacon or sausage, and a homemade sweet potato pie slice. It was too much food for one person. Rose had designed it that way intentionally, believing that breakfast should be abundant, especially during the holidays. The man ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd learned to appreciate food rather than just consume it. Jasmine served other customers, cleared tables, refilled coffee, all while acutely aware of the calendar. December 20th. 2 days left. When the man finished, he gestured for his check. Jasmine printed it out. $19.75. She set it down beside his empty plate, forced another smile. "Thank you so much. Merry Christmas." He looked at her for a long moment. "Your mother must have been an incredible woman." The comment caught her off guard. "I'm sorry. What?" "The photos. I assume that's your mother." He nodded toward the wall where Rose's picture hung. Rose in her apron. Rose laughing with customers. Rose standing in front of the restaurant on opening day in 2005. Jasmine felt her throat tighten. Yes, that's Rose. She started this place. She worked as a maid for over 20 years to save enough money to open it. Is she still involved? The question hurt the way it always did. Jasmine shook her head. She passed away in March, 9 months ago. The man's expression changed. Something in his face shifted, like he'd received information that confirmed something he already suspected. "I'm very sorry for your loss." His voice carried a weight that suggested he understood that particular pain intimately. "Thank you," Jasmine managed. "It's been difficult." The man nodded slowly, stood up, and pulled out his wallet, left cash on the table, walked toward the door without looking back. Jasmine watched him go, then turned to clear another table, her mind already moving back to the impossible problem of $34,500 in 2 days. She cleared 3 more tables before making her way back to the booth where the man had been sitting. She picked up the cash he'd left, started counting it automatically. $100 bill. She'd need to get change from the register, but underneath it was another 100, and another. Her hands stopped moving. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. She counted again. More carefully this time. 20 hundreds, 40 hundred, 60 hundred. Her vision started to blur. 80 hundred, 100, 150 hundred. The restaurant sounds faded away. Everything narrowed down to the stack of bills in her shaking hands. $350 $100 bills. $35,000. Exactly $1,500 more than she needed. And underneath the money, written on the receipt in neat handwriting, was a single sentence that made her knees buckle. For Rose. She gave my son his life back. The 23rd of December, 2004. Jasmine collapsed into the booth. The cash clutched against her chest, unable to breathe properly. This wasn't possible. This didn't happen. Strangers didn't walk into failing restaurants 2 days before Christmas and leave $35,000 in cash with cryptic notes about things that happened 19 years ago. She looked around wildly, half expecting cameras, a prank show, something that would make this make sense. But there was nothing. Just the normal morning crowd finishing their breakfast. Just Keisha Williams asking for her check. Just Bernard Jackson reading the newspaper. Just reality. Except reality had just broken in half. Jasmine ran to the door, threw it open, and looked up and down the street. The man was gone. Completely vanished into the gray Minneapolis morning like he'd never existed. She stood there in the doorway, December cold hitting her face, holding $35,000, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her line cook, Terrell Johnson, came out from the kitchen. He'd been with Mama Rosa's kitchen for 6 years, one of the few employees Jasmine could still afford to keep. "Jasmine, you okay?" She couldn't form words, just held up the cash with one hand, the receipt with the other. Terrell's eyes went wide. Where did that come from? The man. The one in the booth. He left it. All of it. That's not possible. I know. But it happened. For the rest of the day, Jasmine operated in a state of shock, so complete she felt like she was watching herself from outside her body. She called the bank, told them she had the payment. They scheduled her to come in the next day, December 21st. She called Marcus, her accountant, who made her count the money 4 times over video call because he didn't believe it was real. She called her sister, Nicole, who immediately said it had to be fake money or drug money or came with strings that would destroy Jasmine worse than the debt. But the money was real. Jasmine checked every bill. They were genuine, and there were no strings. Just one sentence on a receipt and $35,000 in cash. Jasmine pulled up the security footage from the restaurant cameras. There he was, clear as day, walking in at 7:15, sitting in the booth, eating the Rosa's blessing plate, leaving. But the camera angle didn't capture his face clearly enough for facial recognition. She posted on the restaurant's Facebook page describing the man, asking if anyone knew him. No responses. She asked every regular who came in that day if they'd seen him or knew who he was. Nobody had. She checked the credit card receipts to see if he'd signed in earlier, maybe made a reservation. Nothing. It was like he was a ghost. A Christmas ghost who'd walked in, saved her restaurant, and disappeared into the Minneapolis snow. That night, Jasmine sat in her mother's house, unable to sleep. The money was locked in the restaurant's safe. She'd counted it 7 more times. It was real, all of it. But the question eating her alive wasn't about the money. It was about the words on the receipt. For Rose, she gave my son his life back. The 23rd of December, 2004. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with your country and city. Let's see where everyone's watching from. I genuinely want to know how far this story is reaching. Jasmine went to her mother's bedroom, the place she'd been avoiding since Rose died. It still smelled like her mother, like the cocoa butter lotion Rose used, like the lavender sachet she kept in her drawers. Jasmine had boxed up most of Rose's things in the months after she died, unable to look at them, unable to process the permanence of the loss. But she'd kept the journals. Rose had kept detailed journals for years, not formal business records, just spiral notebooks where she'd write about the restaurant, about customers, about people she'd helped, about her philosophy of feeding people being about more than just food. Jasmine pulled out the boxes of journals, started going through them under the dim light of her mother's bedside lamp. The entries went back to 2005, when Rose first opened the restaurant. A single mother with 3 kids who came in every Friday. Rose gave them double portions, charged them for a single meal. A homeless veteran sat in the corner booth for hours. Rose let him stay as long as he wanted, brought him food even when he couldn't pay. A teenager who'd been kicked out by his parents. Rose fed him every day for 2 months and let him wash dishes for cash until he got into a youth shelter program. Page after page, year after year. Rose's methodical, quiet generosity is documented in her neat handwriting. Some entries were just names and dates. Others were full stories. Jasmine cried while reading them. She'd known her mother was kind. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that. But this was different. This was a mission. Rose had been fighting a one-woman war against hunger and isolation, one meal at a time, for 18 years. This woman who'd spent 2 decades cleaning other people's offices, invisible and unappreciated, had spent another 18 years making sure everyone who walked into her restaurant felt seen, valued, important. Jasmine found the 2004 journal around 2 in the morning. Her eyes were burning. Her back hurt from hunching over, but she kept going, looking for December 23rd, and there it was. The 23rd of December 2004, 4 days before Christmas. The entry was longer than most. Today, something happened that reminded me why I do this, why I opened this restaurant, why I keep feeding people even when the numbers don't make sense. A young man came in around 2 p.m., 17, maybe 18 years old. Black kid, well-dressed, looked completely lost. Sat at the counter and ordered coffee. Just coffee. I watched him for a while. He wasn't drinking it, just staring at it like he was trying to work up the courage for something. I've seen that look before. I saw it on my own face in the mirror plenty of times during those years when I was cleaning offices at night, when people walked past me like I didn't exist, when I felt invisible and worthless. That's the look of someone who's made a decision they can't come back from. I sat down next to him, asked if he was okay. He started crying. Right there at my counter, this teenage boy just broke down crying. His mother had died 2 weeks ago. Sudden, unexpected. He and his father were destroyed. Couldn't figure out how to live without her. He told me he'd come to my restaurant because it was close to where he'd parked his car, and he wanted one last meal before he ended it. Had pills in his pocket, was going to take them somewhere his father wouldn't find him for a while. I don't remember everything I said to him. I talked about losing my own mother when I was young, about how grief feels like drowning, but eventually you learn to float in it. About feeling invisible for so many years, cleaning up after people who never once looked at me or said thank you. About how I decided that invisibility wouldn't define me, that I'd open a place where everyone was seen, everyone mattered. I told him his mother would want him to keep living, keep fighting, keep finding moments of sweetness even in the pain. I made him my special Christmas dinner: turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, collard greens, everything. And I gave him a piece of paper with my sweet potato pie recipe on it, and a note telling him that food can't fix grief, but it can remind you that life still has good things in it. We sat together for 3 hours. His father found us around 5 p.m., He'd been driving around looking for his son, terrified. When he walked in and saw his boy safe, eating pie at my counter, he broke down too. They held each other and cried right there in my restaurant. The father was a wealthy man. I could tell by his clothes, his car, the way he carried himself. And when he looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, I saw recognition in his eyes. He knew me. Not my name, but my face. He'd seen me before, in his office building. I'd cleaned his floor for years, walked past him in the hallways with my cleaning cart, emptied his trash, vacuumed around his desk when he worked late, and he'd never once acknowledged me. Never said hello, never looked at me like I was a person. But in that moment, he saw me, really saw me. The invisible maid who'd just saved his son's life. He tried to give me money right there, pulled out his wallet, tried to hand me hundreds of dollars. I refused, told him the only payment I wanted was for him to start seeing people, all people, especially the ones society trains us to look past, the maids, the janitors, the service workers, the invisible people who keep the world running while everyone pretends we don't exist. He promised he would, shook my hand with tears in his eyes, told me I'd saved his son's life, and he'd never forget it. They left around 6 p.m. The boy was carrying my recipe card. The father had his arm around his son's shoulders, and I sat in my empty restaurant thinking about how we're all connected in ways we can't see. How the woman nobody noticed for 23 years turned out to be the person who saved everything for a family she'd never officially met. I don't know if I'll ever see them again. But I hope that boy keeps living. I hope he finds joy again. I hope he remembers that even on the darkest days, there are strangers who care, who sees you, who thinks you matter. Because everyone does. Everyone matters, even the invisible people. Jasmine read the entry 5 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother, the maid who'd been invisible for 2 decades, had saved a teenager's life by making him feel seen. A young black boy who'd planned to kill himself had walked into Mama Rose's kitchen on December 23, 2004, and Rose had convinced him not to, had sat with him, fed him, given him reasons to keep living. And now, 19 years later, someone had walked into that same restaurant and left enough money to save it. But who? The boy? The father? Rose hadn't written their names, hadn't written any identifying information. Jasmine searched through the rest of December 2004, looking for any follow-up. There was nothing. Just that one entry, and then Rose's normal daily notes about customers and meals and the small kindnesses she showed people. December 21st, the day before her original deadline, Jasmine made the payment to the bank at 9 a.m., deposited $35,000 in cash. The bank manager, Thomas Reed, was stunned. He'd known Rose, had been prepared to start foreclosure proceedings. Instead, he was processing a payment that not only covered the debt, but gave Jasmine a small cushion to handle the repairs the building desperately needed. "Where did you get this?" he asked, professional curiosity overriding discretion. "A customer left it," Jasmine said. "Someone whose life my mother changed. That's all I know." Mama Rose's kitchen was saved. Jasmine should have been celebrating. Instead, she felt desperate, desperate to understand, desperate to thank whoever had done this, desperate to know what her mother had done that inspired this kind of response. 19 years after it happened, and 9 months after she'd died, Jasmine went back to the restaurant, opened for the lunch rush in a daze, served customers, answered questions about whether she'd be closing, explained that a miracle had happened, literally. A Christmas miracle. Around 3 p.m., after the lunch crowd cleared, the restaurant phone rang. Jasmine answered, expecting a customer, asking about dinner hours. Instead, a man's voice she recognized said, "Is this Jasmine Washington?" It was him, the man from yesterday morning. "Yes, this is Jasmine. Who is this, please?" There was a pause. Static on the line. Then, "My name is Richard Brooks. I was in your restaurant yesterday. I left something for you." Jasmine's heart felt like it stopped. "Why? Why did you do that?" Another pause. "Because 19 years ago, on December 23rd, 2004, your mother sat with my son for 3 hours and talked him out of killing himself. And I never got the chance to thank her properly. Jasmine couldn't breathe. You're the father. The one in her journal. Yes. My son was 17. His mother had just died. He was going to end it. And Rose saved him. Your mother was the maid who cleaned my office building, wasn't she? Yes, Jasmine whispered. She cleaned offices for 23 years before she opened this restaurant. I know, Richard said quietly. I walked past her hundreds of times. Never once acknowledged her. Never saw her as anything more than part of the furniture. And then one day, years later, she saved my son's life. I never forgot that. Never forgot how a woman I'd treated as invisible turned out to be the most important person in our lives. The phone felt heavy in Jasmine's hand. Can we meet? Can you come back? I need to understand. Tomorrow, Richard said. 8 a.m. Same booth. I'll bring my son. He needs to meet you. He needs to tell you himself what your mother did for him. And Jasmine, I need you to know something. Your mother changed me, too. Changed how I saw people. How I treated service workers, custodians, and anyone in those invisible jobs. I spent the rest of my life trying to make up for all the years I'd walked past people like your mother without seeing them. All because of what she did for my son. I'll be there tomorrow, Jasmine said. Thank you for this. For saving the restaurant. For letting me know what she meant to you. She deserved to be seen, Richard said. She spent so many years being invisible. She deserved to know that people saw her, that what she did mattered. The line went dead. Pause for a second. Has anyone in your life ever been invisible to you? Someone you walk past every day without really seeing? Drop a comment. This story is about to get even more powerful. December 22nd. The day that would have been her final deadline. The day she would have lost everything. Instead, Jasmine was sitting in the same booth where Richard Brooks had sat 2 days before, where her mother had sat 19 years before, with a suicidal teenager, waiting. Richard walked in at exactly 8 a.m. But he wasn't alone. A younger man was with him, mid-30s, African-American, well-dressed, successful-looking, but his eyes held something deep. Something that looked like old pain that had healed but left scars. This is my son, Richard said. Marcus Brooks. Marcus, this is Jasmine Washington, Rose's daughter. Marcus extended his hand, but when Jasmine took it, he pulled her into a hug instead. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Your mother saved my life, he said into her shoulder. I wouldn't be here without her. They sat down. Jasmine had coffee ready. Her hands shook as she poured it. Richard folded his hands on the table, took a breath, and began. In December 2004, my son Marcus was 17 years old, a senior in high school, straight-A student, full scholarship to Howard University starting the next fall. His whole life was ahead of him. And then on December 7th, his mother died. Her name was Patricia Brooks. She was 45 years old, brain aneurysm, went to work in the morning, collapsed at her desk at noon, and died before the ambulance arrived. No warning, no chance to say goodbye, just gone. Richard's voice was steady, but Jasmine could hear the old pain underneath it. I completely fell apart. I was a senior executive at a finance company, successful, wealthy, used to being in control. But losing Patricia destroyed that control. I didn't know how to handle it, couldn't function, couldn't get out of bed. Marcus had to plan the funeral, had to notify relatives, had to keep going to school and pretend everything was fine while his entire world had just exploded. Marcus took over, his voice quiet but strong. By December 23rd, I was done, completely done. I couldn't see any reason to keep going. Everything hurt. Every breath hurt. I kept thinking about how my mom would never see me graduate, never see me go to Howard, never see anything I'd do with my life. And it felt pointless. All of it felt pointless. Jasmine wiped tears from her face. Marcus continued, I went to the pharmacy that morning, bought 2 bottles of pills, figured I'd take them somewhere quiet. Somewhere. My dad wouldn't find me right away. I didn't want him to be the one to find me. After everything he'd already been through, I drove around Minneapolis for hours. Ended up parking near this restaurant I'd never been to, Mama Rose's kitchen. Well, it was called Rose's place back then. I walked in because I wanted one last meal. Figured I'd eat something good, then go do what I'd planned. Marcus pulled out a worn piece of paper protected in plastic, slid it across the table to Jasmine. Your mother was behind the counter. She looked at me, and something in her face changed. Like she recognized something in me. She didn't smile, didn't try to be cheerful, just walked over and sat down next to me at the counter. And she said, "You look like someone who's carrying something too heavy. You want to talk about it?" Jasmine took the paper. It was a recipe card in her mother's handwriting. But above the recipe for sweet potato pie, Rose had written a note. "Marcus, grief is not something you get over. It's something you learn to carry. I know what it feels like to be invisible, to feel like you don't matter. I spent 23 years cleaning offices while people walked past me like I wasn't there. Your father was one of those people. He walked past me every day for years, never saw me, never acknowledged I existed. But I see you. I see your pain. I see that you matter. Your mother's death is not the end of her influence on your life. She lives in every choice you make, every kindness you show, every moment you choose life over despair. I am a stranger to you. I am the invisible maid your father never noticed, but I see you. I see your pain. I see your potential. I see a young black man who has so much left to give this world. Please don't take that away from us. Food cannot fix grief, but it can remind you that life still has sweetness in it. Try my sweet potato pie. If you can still taste how good it is, if you can still appreciate something beautiful, then you can survive this. Your mother would want you to survive this. Stay. Fight. Live. The people who love you need you to stay." Rose Washington, the 23rd of December 2004. Below the note was Rose's recipe, written in her precise handwriting. Marcus's voice broke slightly. "She made me that pie. Made me a full Christmas dinner even though Christmas was 2 days away. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, collard greens, everything. Sat with me for 3 hours. Told me about her own losses, about her own struggles with feeling invisible and worthless, about how she'd learned that one person seeing you, really seeing you, can make all the difference. My father found us around 5 p.m. He'd been driving around Minneapolis looking for me, terrified. When he walked in and saw me safe, eating pie at Rose's counter, he knew. He just knew what had almost happened. Richard took over. And then I recognized her. Rose. The maid who cleaned my office floor. I'd walked past hundreds, maybe thousands of times over the years. Never once said hello. Never acknowledged her existence. Never treated her like a human being who mattered. And here she was, having just spent 3 hours saving my son's life. The woman I'd treated as invisible had turned out to be the most important person in my family's story. Jasmine felt chills run down her spine. Richard continued. I broke down. Not just because Marcus was safe, but because I realized what I'd done, how I'd treated people, how I'd walked past Rose for years like she wasn't even there. And now she'd saved everything I had left. I tried to thank her, tried to give her money right there. She refused, told me the only payment she wanted was for me to start seeing people, all people, especially the ones society trains us to look past, the maids, the janitors, the service workers, the invisible people who keep our world running while we pretend they don't exist. I never forgot that. I spent the rest of my career trying to make up for it. Started a foundation that provides scholarships for children of service workers. Changed how I treated every person I encountered. Cleaners, cafeteria workers, security guards, everyone. I made sure I saw them. Made sure they knew they mattered. All because Rose forced me to see what my blindness could have cost me. Marcus looked at Jasmine with eyes that held 19 years of gratitude. Your mother saved my life that day. Not metaphorically, literally. I walked into her restaurant planning to kill myself within the hour. I walked out with a reason to try one more day. And then another day. And another. I carried that recipe card with me to Howard. Through college. Through graduate school. Through starting my first company and failing. Through starting my second company and succeeding. Through meeting my wife. Through the birth of my daughters. through every major moment of my life. I've kept it in my wallet for 19 years. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. A family photo from last Christmas. Marcus, a beautiful black woman, and two young girls, all smiling in front of a Christmas tree. This is my wife Angela, and my daughters, Kennedy and Morgan. Kennedy is 14, Morgan is 11, and I've been thinking a lot lately about how none of this exists without your mother. My girls wouldn't exist, my marriage wouldn't exist, my company wouldn't exist. Every person my company has employed, every community program we've funded, every scholarship we've given to kids whose parents work invisible jobs, none of it exists without Rose Washington deciding that a suicidal teenager she'd never met was worth saving. So when my father found out last month that your mother had passed away, Marcus's voice broke, and we started researching her restaurant, learned you were about to lose it, and we knew we had to do something. Had to make sure her legacy survived. Had to make sure Mama Rose's kitchen kept being the place where people could come when they're drowning. Had to make sure the woman who spent 23 years being invisible would never be forgotten. Jasmine found her voice. $35,000 is too much. I can never repay you. Richard held up his hand gently. You're not supposed to repay us. You're supposed to do what your mother did. Keep feeding people. Keep seeing them. Keep being the place where someone like Marcus can walk in on the worst day of their life and find someone who convinces them to stay. That's how you repay it. By continuing her work, by making sure the maid who was invisible for 23 years keeps changing lives even after she's gone. But how did you know the exact amount I needed? Jasmine asked. Marcus smiled slightly. My father tracked me down last month, told me about Rose's death. We hired investigators. We've had people researching your financial situation for weeks. We know about your debt, your struggles, and how you've been trying to keep her mission alive while drowning financially. We know that Rose would be so proud of you, that she'd want you to accept help the same way I had to accept help from her that day. Jasmine looked down at the recipe card, her mother's handwriting blurring through her tears. Why didn't you just tell me who you were 2 days ago? Why leave the money and disappear? Because the best kind of help expects nothing back, Richard said. Your mother didn't sit with Marcus that day because she thought he'd grow up to be successful or that we would repay her someday. She did it because it was right. Because he was suffering and she had the capacity to help. Because she'd spent so many years being invisible, and she refused to let anyone else feel that way in her presence. We wanted to honor that, to give anonymously, the way she gave to hundreds of people over the years. But then we realized you deserved to know the story, deserved to understand what your mother meant to people. How the maid nobody saw turned out to be the woman who saved everything. Richard pulled out another document, set it on the table between them. This is a trust we've established, the Rose Washington Memorial Fund. It's funded with $5 million. The interest will cover your operating costs indefinitely, not just to keep you solvent, but to make sure you can continue giving away Retry BB Continue meals the way Rose did. To make sure you never have to choose between kindness and survival. To make sure the restaurant built by a woman who was invisible for 23 years never stops making people feel seen. Jasmine stared at the document, unable to process what she was reading. $5 million. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Marcus's answer was immediate. Because 19 years ago, I was sitting in this restaurant with pills in my pocket, ready to die, and your mother convinced me life was worth living. Everything I have, everything my family is, exists because Rose Washington decided that a heartbroken black teenager mattered. How do you put a price on that? You can't. So we're making sure her legacy continues, making sure this restaurant keeps being the place where people can come when they're drowning. Richard leaned forward. And there's more. We're expanding the model. We want to fund 10 more restaurants across the country. Places in underserved communities where people need what Rose created here. Safe spaces. Places where everyone eats. Places where the invisible becomes visible. We're calling it the Rose Washington Initiative. Each restaurant will operate on the same principle your mother established. Feed everyone. See everyone. Make sure nobody leaves hungry. Jasmine couldn't speak. Her throat was completely closed with emotion. Marcus continued, his voice gentle but firm. Your mother spent 23 years cleaning up after people who never saw her, never thanked her, never acknowledged she was human. And instead of becoming bitter, instead of turning that pain inward, she decided to create the opposite. A place where everyone was seen, everyone mattered. That's revolutionary, Jasmine. That's not just running a restaurant. That's changing how people understand their worth. We want to replicate that. We want Rose's philosophy to reach thousands of people, and we want you to help us do it. You'll be the director of the initiative. We'll handle the funding, but you'll bring your mother's heart. You'll train the staff. You'll make sure each location captures what Rose built here. Will you do it? Jasmine looked at the trust document. In Marcus's family photo, at Richard's face, a face her mother had seen hundreds of times while he looked right through her. At the recipe card with her mother's handwriting. And she thought about Rose. About 23 years of pushing a cleaning cart through office buildings. 23 years of being invisible. 23 years of people walking past her like she was furniture. And how Rose had taken all that pain, all that invisibility, and transformed it into something beautiful. A restaurant where everyone was seen. Where a suicidal teenager could find a reason to live. Where a wealthy executive could learn to see the people he'd been trained to ignore. Where hundreds of struggling people had found meals and dignity and proof that someone cared. Rose Washington had been invisible for 23 years. But her visibility, when it finally came, had saved lives, had created families, had changed how people saw the world. And now, 9 months after her death, her legacy was expanding. 10 restaurants, thousands of meals, countless invisible people are finally being seen. Jasmine looked at Marcus and Richard through her tears. She'd do it. She'd be the voice for her mother's mission. She'd make sure Rose Washington's name became synonymous with dignity, with kindness, with the revolutionary act of seeing people. She'd make sure the maid who cleaned offices for 23 years would be remembered not for her invisibility, but for how she made everyone else visible. Yes, Jasmine said. Yes, I'll do it. For her. For every person who's ever felt invisible. For every Marcus out there who needs someone to sit with them and remind them they matter. Yes. Marcus smiled, stood up, and pulled Jasmine into another hug. Welcome to the family. Your mother gave me mine back. Now we're going to make sure she keeps giving that gift to others. Long after we're all gone. That's her legacy. That's what the invisible maid built. And that's the real Christmas miracle. Merry Christmas, Jasmine. Merry Christmas, Mama Rose. Thank you for seeing me when I needed it most. Outside, snow began to fall on Minneapolis. Inside Mama Rose's kitchen, 3 people sat together, planning how to change the world one meal at a time. The way Rose Washington had always done, by seeing people, by feeding them, by reminding them they mattered. The invisible maid had become unforgettable, and her work was just beginning.